Roadkill Extra appears every single weekday at Motor Trend On Demand. It's a show that gives you question and answer sessions, deeper looks into our project vehicles, behind the scenes stuff, and here's a sample right now of one of the shows that you missed last week on MotorTrendOnDemand.com. You can watch them all with a 30-day free trial. Hey, it's David Freiburger here, and this is going to be one of those Roadkill Extras where I show you deeper inside one of our project vehicles, and that is this, a 1968 Jeep Wagoneer that we rescued out of Colorado. Me and Rick Péwé did that. It was an episode where Dulcich was tied up, and so we ended up with a special guest, and we did Jeeps, which is what Péwé and I do. Now, this is really similar to the 68, or was it a 67 Jeep panel truck that Dulcich and I did on an earlier episode of Roadkill Garage, but that's because these full-size Jeeps were the same from 1963 to 1991. There is so much that's identical to this 68 that's on a 91, bodywork-wise. They made some changes in the frame. They changed the leaf spring configuration. They made wide track ones. There's some mechanical differences. There's a whole bunch of different engines that they put in them, but essentially they're unchanged. It's a huge production run of the very same kind of body style. And the panel truck is a two-door with no windows whatsoever. This is obviously a Wagoneer. This is going to be a much more comfy cruiser than the panel truck. The panel truck's a military vehicle. It's got no carpet, no sound deadening. It's a 6-cylinder. It's a 3 on the tree. It's rough riding. This thing is cush. The drivetrain in this one begins with a pretty unusual engine. They put these in the full-size Jeep Wagoneers and trucks from 1965 to either 1967 or 1968. You'll often read that the Rambler engine in the Wagoneer stopped in 1967, but this one is a 1968 model, and it's still got this engine in it. So I'm thinking perhaps there was a mid-year changeover, because the engine after this was a 350 Buick. So you can see they sort of pulled from the parts bin when they were making drivetrains for these things. The 327 Rambler V8 is sort of an antique, even when it was put in this thing brand new. It was designed in like 1954 for 1956 model Ramblers. And so that is a 50s designed engine that ends up in this 68 Wagoneer. I guess the small block Chevy was designed in the 50s too, and it's still being used, but this thing is antiquated. They designed it in 18 months, and I think it shows. It is a really funky engine. They made them in displacements of 250, and 287 and 327, and they were in Rambler and Nash cars back in the day. And what's even freakier about this is that the transmission is a GM Turbo 400, which might make it seem like I could pull this out and bolt a small block Chevy in, but you can't, because the Turbo 400 they used in these things was actually for the early Buick nail head bolt pattern. It's sort of more of a circle than the other GM V8s. And it's adapted with a factory adapter ring to the Rambler motor. So once again, kind of a freak show. This thing has a Dana 44 rear end with flanged axles. Let's show you that just a little bit around here. A lot of the Jeeps came this way, even up to and including the CJ7s that had a Model 20 AMC rear end. See this big nut right here? It is holding the axle flange that has the lug nuts on it to a tapered axle shaft. So it's actually two pieces. And more annoyingly on this, the drum, the brake drum, is swedged onto the lug nuts so that you can't get the brake drum off separate from the hub. So you got to pull the whole hub off to get it apart. It's really Mickey Mouse. I think in 1971, they came out with a flanged Dana 44 for these full-size Jeeps, but this one is the old style. So it's a Dana 44 in the back. Up front, the axle is a Dana 27A. It's got drum brakes all around. It's a closed knuckle front end. This is kind of cool. One of the things Péwé and I really enjoy in all these old 4x4s that we pick up is the huge variety of aftermarket locking hubs that were on these things. You know, a ton of companies made them. There was like the Denver Hub Company. There was Warn, obviously, Mile Marker, all sorts of old ones. Selectro, and this is a lever lock. What this does is it engages the wheel to the front axles when you're in four-wheel drive, and then it disengages them where you're just driving around in two-wheel drive to save wear and tear on the whole front end. Interestingly, modern 4x4s, they don't bother with a disconnect at all. There was a time in the mid-80s when they used what was called a center axle disconnect, sort of a vacuum controlled sleeve that coupled the axle together, but now they've figured out that it's just not even worth it and they run full-time front. But look at this. Here's how the lever lock works. This lever pulls out and it says free on it right here, and then you rotate it like that and put it in and it says lock, and you have to do that to both of them just like that. And this, by the way, is a spectacularly good working lever lock hub. Usually you have to fight them a little bit, but this one is super, super smooth. Okay, let's look a little bit more into our specific Wagoneer instead of talking history. So I got this thing from a guy in Colorado who had bought it from the son of an old guy who passed away, who had it in the garage for 22 years. And the odometer says 14,000 miles on it, and those guys were convinced that it had 14,000 original miles. I really don't think so. Here's why. First of all, it's been completely repainted. This is the original color, which is called Empire Blue. It's pretty cool, sort of a greenish blue. This white stripe on it is not factory. There was a lot of Wagoneers that did have a two-tone like this, or even a Super Wagoneer that had a cool insert in it, but they had trim around them, which this doesn't. And so this would have been all one color when it was factory. The interior is in really good shape. It has been reupholstered. They did not have velour like that in 1968 when they made this thing, but someone took really, really good care of it. I mean, even the carpet is in nice shape. You can see it had the footwell mats in it from when it was brand new. And look particularly at this clear plastic on the Jeep emblem on the steering wheel. You never see those things that crystal clear. So that part of it is in really good shape. But the other things that tell me that it doesn't have super low mileage is the master cylinder's been rebuilt. It had a remanufactured water pump in it when we first took it apart. It had a remanufactured alternator and starter. So this thing has some miles on it. It is really straight except for this dent that I put in it while we were filming the episode, which really bums me out because that's like a critical body line to me, just that little bit of square off right there. Other than that, it's super straight. It does have a little bit of rust down here. If you are shopping for one of these Wagoneers, you will see this part of them rusts out all the time. That part virtually doesn't exist, and this one doesn't even have Bondo in it, so that made me really, really happy. Oh, I have to show you this because I'm going to criticize cameraman Brad right now. See this right here? This is where tape pulled paint off of the car when we had a GoPro mounted right there, which is a bummer. It's not a very good paint job, which is why I freaked out when they stuck this on the car for me. In case of fire or spill, use the emergency shut-off in front of the kiosk. This came from some gas station somewhere, but it's a magnet. Look right here, you can see where there was one of those old ball-style CB mounts right here. This thing would have been epic with a CB radio. This is cool too. I have forever gone to junkyards and collected photos of old dealership badges. This is only the second vehicle I've ever had that actually has one on it. University Lincoln Mercury, Boulder, Colorado. That's really neat. And look at this, the crank down window is mint. You never see that in these, and it's critical because if you look inside here, this panel gives you access to the mechanism in here, and they're always completely jacked up. So I'm really happy this one's in good shape, and it's not rusted in here as most of them are. What I really don't get though is look how heavy this tailgate is. They sold these things to families when they were new, and honestly, not to be sexist, I don't know how a lot of like smaller women can pick it up because it's pretty heavy. So that's pretty much it. That is the Roadkill Garage 68 Wagoneer. I bought the thing to turn it into a sleeper drag car, but I've kind of fallen in love with it. And as you saw in the end of the episode, I just didn't know what I'm gonna do with it. It's probably gonna sit at Péwé's house for a long time. That's my guess. Let me know. What should I do? Once again, check us out at Roadkill Show on both Facebook and Instagram. If you need more Roadkill Extra, go sign up for the 30-day free trial right now.